was a scene from Magic with Anthony Hopkins as Corky and your companion, Fats. I want to ask you something because when we were beginning this, there was a voiceover and I was quoting you about saying an actor would have to be crazy. Initially, you thought, to accept a role like that. When did it change? When did you realize you were indeed not crazy accepting the role?
I think during some of the more complex scenes, for example, the card trick I play with Anne Margaret, because Richard Attenborough, who's had such a long career as an actor, is in total control. Another scene when we were walking by the lake, which was, I don't know, for some reason it presented enormous difficulties in my mind or imagination, is I believe that all problems are illusions anyway, and when they do exist, they're technical. And the wonderful thing is that Attenborough was in such charge, was in such control, that he made it easy. He filmed in bits and pieces. He said, don't worry, nothing can go wrong. And so I thought, well, I'm home and dry. And I was, because at the end of each day I used to go into the dressing room and wonder how we got through scenes. There were days, however, when I believed that I was crazy, and I thought, why did I take this part? Because there was one period when I wanted to kill the dummy, or the doll, Fats. It sometimes was difficult to coordinate and think in two tracks of thought. It's like trying to, and on one or two occasions it became impossible. The song, when Fats sings the song, Our Sweet Mystery of Life, it was impossible, and I had to get help on that. And I think we took about 2 or 3 days to film that. I can't remember. I remember it was a day when, there was one day, in fact, when they sent the producer on in a white coat, and they sort of dragged me off screaming, and they still kept the camera rolling. But all in all, it was a great deal of fun, and as Laurence Olivier once said, he said that acting is the sugar pill to knowledge, and I've learned sleight of hand, I've learned ventriloquism, and I got paid for it. So it was a fascinating role, and I'm glad I did it. I'd do it all over again if I was asked to.
But would you do it the same way?
Yes, yes. I've seen the film 4 times. I saw it at the private showings, and I think it's a mistake to go and see the film too many times because I started looking for holes in it. Yes, I do it all over again.
If problems are illusions, is that an understanding that comes to one with maturity? If problems are illusions, why did you feel you had so many as a younger man?
Well, because I've learned, or am learning, in the process of learning to live in the solution and not the problem anymore. I suppose the illusion that I was unique, the illusion that I was alone, which is the symptom of a vast ego, which can only be viewed from outer space, I suppose. I had a big ego problem, and I came to a point at one time, it was a slow kind of realization that I was a very self-destructive person, and that I was not unique, that I was not on the outside looking in, and that there were other people like me who felt uncomfortable and outside of life. And I think that from about the age of 4, I remember just feeling totally at ease. I thought everyone else may have been speaking Chinese or something because I didn't know what they were talking about at school and through the whole of my, through most of my life. Until sort of recent years, when I came to America after New York, after I finished Equus, and I realized that I was sort of running out of time because I was running wild, and I was on the move. I felt unworthy to be an actor. I felt unworthy of success. I felt massive guilt about I don't know what. Until gradually it was sort of explained to me through other people, by other people, and through, I think, a voice inside myself saying, there's nothing to fear, live and accept life and accept the good in life and don't be so guilty. There's nothing to be guilty about. There's nothing to be frightened of. And what I've come around to understanding is that I have a faith in God, which I didn't have before. I was too clever, and now I'm not clever anymore. I try to keep out of my own way, as much as I can, which has given me a sort of peace of mind. I mean, and I get uptight, but it's all right. I know that there's no big deal anymore. Nothing is a big deal. In a way, it's a game. And in a way, I'm off the hook. I preface it by saying, in a way, I'm mostly off the hook. I try, for example, doing Magic, I don't analyze anymore, I don't analyze the parts I'm playing. Because I trust that I'm here for some reason. I trust that I'm being cared for. And that I have a gift which is on trust to me, and I don't have to despise it or put it down anymore. So it's been an interesting journey. The last couple of years have been the best years of my life. Maybe it's come with success or better work. And people used to tell me, they say, what's the matter, Tony? You're all right. You're a good actor. Why quarrel with it? And I said, well, I could never accept that on a deep level, and now I've accepted it, and I accept it gratefully. So in fact, I feel sort of uncomfortable when I take credit, meaning that when I approached magic, I just showed up. I did a lot of preparation. All I have to do is be ready, I guess, and that I try to apply it through my life now. And I just have to get ready, I just have to do what is asked of me and do as much as I can without driving myself insane. Because there's a negative side of perfectionism. In my nature, anyway, I can only speak for myself. There's a negative flaw, and there's a very dangerous trap, and I think one of the biggest killers is ego. And when it's the negative side of perfectionism, when one starts playing God, and I mean literally, there is a killer, there is a lethal part of one's own ego. And I've just been very fortunate and blessed, really, for today, to be given the opportunity just to live, and because I really was self-destructive.
When you speak that way about ego and perfectionism, you remind me of Hume Cronin's line about perfectionism is a terrible burden and one I wish I didn't have.
Yes, I know how he feels.
But he's stuck with it, and I think that perfectionism is something, obviously, that one's burdened with through life, but resolving the ego. I want to ask you about playing the piano as a boy. Was there a special sense of solace or comfort for you playing the piano as a boy?
Yes. 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 I started... You see, I wasn't too sharp at school. I wasn't too swift at school, and the only way I was able to overcome all this was to play the piano and develop other skills. Like I was a very good mimicker and an impersonator and all that sort of thing, and I was a compulsive joke teller. I was kind of introverted and not unique, but I mean, I was just quiet. I was kind of isolated, and I started playing the piano, and I was the only child, and my mother decided I was going to be in Carnegie Hall. I saw a film once, a kind of semi-documentary story film called Carnegie Hall, and I had a dream of playing in Carnegie Hall. Why Carnegie Hall? I didn't even know where it was. I knew it was somewhere in the United States. But I studied the piano. When I say studied, I tried, and I drove my father mad. I mean, he didn't like the sound of my playing, and God bless him, he meant the best. He didn't mean any harm, but I got very confused in that area, and so I gave up playing the piano. But I've started all over again, and I live in California, and we've bought a piano, and I'm starting again after 20 years, and I'm picking up where I left off. And I was too ambitious, you see, I was too ambitious. I wanted to play concert standard at the age of 12, and when I practice now, I still have to fight the instinct to practice as if I'm going to play in the Hollywood Bowl. So I take it easy and play for my own enjoyment.
Tell you what, we'll take a break and come back with more of Magic. Be right back with Anthony Hopkins and more. That was Anthony Hopkins with Anne Margaret and Fats in another scene from Magic. There's no way that you could have known William Goldman when he was writing Magic, even though you may have known each other during the filming of A Bridge Too Far. But I find something almost sardonic about the reality of Anthony Hopkins' childhood and your miserable life in school when you say you hated it and you couldn't even find the courage to approach girls until you were in your late teens. And the fact that Corky Withers in Magic is the kind of man, without revealing too much of the plot, who courts someone he's been infatuated with most of his life through the use or misuse of the dummy. And I just wonder, without being too psychiatric about it or philosophical, if there wasn't some special satisfaction for you in conveying these teenage pent-up emotions and wondering why, as a teenager, you hadn't had a Fats in your life.
Well, I did have a Fats, you see.
Did you really?
In a way. And I didn't analyze the part, not by choice, but because I've given up analyzing. I can't analyze parts anymore because Attenborough, for example, I get to the answer as fast as I can. Attenborough asked me, for example, if I wanted to talk to a psychiatrist about the part, to analyze I said no, and he said, good. He said, you'll just do it, won't you? I said, yes, I hope so. Because I've played some strange parts. I've played disturbed men, I've played men on trial, anxious men, and so on. But it only came to me the other day. in Chicago, of all places. I was on this promo tour. Somebody asked me the question, was there any similarity in my own life? And it suddenly occurred to me, yes, there was. And what I'd used was my instinct. But what I go back in my childhood, my lonely childhood, and I couldn't communicate, so I had a series of jokes and a repertoire of impersonation and mimicry and all that. And that made me fit. I was able to bridge the gap, But I still felt a little uneasy because it wasn't, it was synthetic. I wasn't being me. I was being all these different people. And I guess that's why I came into the acting profession. But now I guess that I'm in it for the right reason because it's not a therapy for me anymore. As I think it was. I don't know what it was. I don't know why I became an actor. I know I am. But in fact, Fats, the doll, or the dummy, or the figure, is in concrete or wooden form, if you pardon the expression, in solid form, is all that. It was my means of bridging that gap. The sad thing about Corky is that he's a person who never emotionally matured, and he's a 4-year-old child in an adult body, which makes him highly dangerous. And it, without revealing the story, it makes him, that's a dangerous combination for anyone. So Fats, in fact, is the equivalent of my joke-telling, my impersonations, all my feelings of ease, and the means I had of bridging those sort of gulfs, But I didn't realize that at the time, but I had a wonderful time playing all that rage and all that anger. That's the wonderful thing about being an actor, because you can play all these great things. I'm going to do Hamlet next year, and I can't wait to do it.
In Los Angeles?
Yes.
With your own company that you formed?
Yes, and I'm going to direct it. I haven't formed the company. I've been invited to present it at a company and to use the company. It's the South Coast Repertory Company in Costa Mesa. And I'm longing, I can't wait to start. I've prepared the whole production. It's taken me 2 years.
You're telling us now, Tony, that your friend Carol Burnett is going to have to wait to play Madame Arcotti in Live Spirit. You postponed that, have you?
I wanted her to do that. We want to work together. Yes, but we have to postpone it.
How did you and Carol Burnett become friends? How did you meet?
It was a strange coincidence or miracle, I guess. Miracle. I was on a station in Holland. I was doing Bridge of Fun. My wife and I were travelling up to Amsterdam one day, and she bought a woman's magazine. It was an English magazine, Vogue, I think. And there was a story of Carol Burnett in it, and she said, read that. And I read the story about Carol Burnett and how she had experienced some kind of revelation in her life through yoga. Spiritual revelation in her life, and upheaval in her life, and a change in her life. And I remember I'd just gone through my, whatever it was, change, I guess. And I remember reading this and I thinking, I'd love to meet her. I'd love to meet her. I admire her as a comedian. I think she's terrific. And we came back from Holland, because I'd worked with Olivier in Holland. There's strange links, because when we came back from Holland and came back to California, Olivier was on vacation in California with his wife and 3 children. And they were renting Carol Burnett's house out at the beach. Anyway, one night there was a party, and it was like walking into a movie magazine. It was at Robert Wagner's, and we stepped in there, and who should be sitting there but Carol Burnett? And apparently I'd been her favourite actor. So we sort of automatically flew into each other's arms, and we've become very good friends, and we see each other quite a lot, She's very busy at the moment, and her career's taken a whole new turn, and she's now broken away from her brand of comedy, in which she was marvellous. So we see each other once in a while,
When I think of the acclaim you've received, and you've mentioned about the kind of characters you played, and whether it's the acclaim for Pierre and War and Peace, or doing the Hoffman Lindbergh film, and everything you have done, it seems that people have forgotten the acclaim you received doing Feydeau, a flea in her ear, and doing Farce. And I wonder sometimes if there isn't a burning desire to go out and do Noel Coward, or do Design for Living, or anything, and say, look, I can't just suffer in these roles. I want to do... It's like John Standing saying, all I ever wanted to do in England was a song and dance routine. I never got the chance.
Yes.
What about you? Do you want to sing and dance?
Not particularly to sing and dance. I'd like to dance, maybe. I'd like to sing. I don't know if I can sing. My wife says, she says, you've got such a good voice. Why don't you get a musical going? I don't know. I haven't tried that yet. Maybe I'll do that one day. I want to do comedy. I've had a wonderful time playing all these complex parts. They have been marvellous because they've helped me in a way. They've, I suppose, filtered down into my subconscious mind and given me an enormous... I've gained from playing them. But I want to play light comedy. I would love to play Noel Coward. I'd love to do what Burt Reynolds does, and I know Burt Reynolds wants to do what I do, and I don't know, I'm having such fun now, you see, in this part of my life. And but if they offered me another Corky, if they offered me another whatever, Pierre. I mean, Pierre was the part I loved most, I think. But if they offered me those, sure, I'd take them. But I want to get off. You see, people think I'm rather serious, and I'm not. I used to be, but I'm not anymore.
I think you should play the piano more at parties. We have to take another break. Okay. Be right back with Anthony Hopkins and more. Anthony Hopkins is with us. We've been looking at scenes and talking around acting, magic. Were you involved in magic at any time during the more than 1 year that Norman Jewison worked on the film before his falling out with Joseph E. Levine?
No.
No? You only came into the film with Richard Attenborough?
Mm-hmm. It's the middle of last year, middle of '77.
Did you know that Norman Jewison had worked on the project for almost a year?
Oh, yes. There's a kind of long, strangely, sort of long story, because I worked with Joe Levine 10 years ago in Lion in Winter, Richard Attenborough, Bridge Too Far. My wife said, she said, you know that Attenborough's going to do magic. She said, wonderful part for you. I said, really? I said, well, I don't want to know. I said, if it's a wonderful part, she said, but it's an American part. I said, no. Anyway, during we did a promo tour of Bridge Too Far, and Attenborough said, I want you to do magic. Did you want me to do magic? I said, but I thought Norman Jewison was doing it. He said, no, I'm going to do it. He said, I want you to play it. He said, but I have to work on Joe Levine. And I said, well, fine, thank you. I said, but don't pester me with it, don't tease me with it. I said, he said, well, read the book. I said, no, I want to know if I've got it or not. And I knew roughly what the story was, and I knew it was a marvellous part. And Joe teased me with it, wicked Joe Levine. He said, you want to play Corky? I said, I didn't know what you're talking about. Anyway, I did such a I psyched myself out, and I decided I didn't want to know about it until they made up their minds, because I didn't want to be disappointed. He phoned me up one Sunday afternoon and said, you've got it. Well, I'd done such a job on myself. I said, what do you mean I've got it? He said, you've got Corky. I said, oh, I couldn't believe it. So I read the book, and then I read the script, and I thought, they were insane. Nobody can play it. I mean, how can I play this? I can't even pick up a pack of cards. They invited a magician when I was in London doing International Velvet, and Michael Bailey came along, gave me a pack of cards. He said, can you shuffle them? I said, no. He said, well, try. And they fell all over the floor. Richard Attenborough's colour drained from his face, and he went kind of chalk white. And Bailey said to me, he said, well, just learn. He said, just practice. And he gave me some basic moves, and I learned one-hand cuts and fans and those springs and waterfall shuffles. And then I learned the coin trick. And I'm amazed, probably because I play the piano, and I kept a very positive attitude towards it. Every time I said I can't do it, I said I can do it, I can. And I used to write little notes to myself in my script, notes all through my script. You can do it, you can do all this. All things are possible. And I meditate, and that helps me as well. And I sort of visualized myself doing it. And then I had and it was amazing. I mean, I did it.
I want to offer a line back to you and see if things have changed. When you said this profession, acting, is built on quicksand, do you remember the line? Does it sound like something you said about acting?
Yes, I said it when I was in New York, I believe. About acting or the profession. I said it in New York, built in quicksand. So you don't know where you are at any time. I still don't know where I am. I said lots of things which maybe I'll change my mind about. What else have you got?
Explain something to us, though. When you talk about security and dealing with ego and contentment within one's own achievement, why, when you arrived in New York to do Equus, and we know that you did it for 9 months and had a tremendous success in New York with it, why did you feel free? Why did you say, when I arrived in New York, I felt free?
I'd always had an instinct or a hunch that I would feel at home in America. I'd always had the dream of coming to America. I'd had the dream that Dylan Thomas had, I guess, of coming to America. I don't know why, and I suppose maybe I was brought up on American movies when I was a kid. And when I came to New York, I did feel free. I don't know, I've never felt at home in my own... I've never felt at home with actors, for example. I've never felt at home within this profession. When I was in the English National Theatre, I never felt at home there. Although I'm indebted to Laurence Olivier and John Dexter and Joan Plowright and so on, I never forget what, their helping hands. But I never felt I fitted in. And I went back there recently, and I feel uneasy, and I don't know, I'd like to get rid of that feeling. I don't know, it's going to take a little time maybe. But in America, when I came to New York, people were very generous. They seemed to they were very encouraging. But I know that probably the answer is in myself somewhere. You know, it's my attitude that I have to change. But in England, I've never actually felt comfortable. It's a strange feeling, but especially in the acting profession, I don't know what it is. It's all probably a hangover from that feeling that I didn't belong, you know. And because that's my birthplace and that's where I lived most of my life, you know, it'll probably take a long time to change those ideas of mine, because they're probably only my ideas. There's probably nothing wrong at all. There's nothing. The negative is probably myself. I'm sure it is. I know it is. Nevertheless, the fact is that I've never been so happy. Everything seems to have happened in my life over here. I got to California and my life has changed in many ways, not only through the acting profession. People seem to like what I want and seem to like what I do. And I've ended up wanting what I want, wanting what I've got. I'm more at home with myself. In California or in New York, I feel at home. Or Canada, I know it's all the same continent. I just feel, the last couple of years, I've really felt at home. I felt I've got it together, as they say. I just feel at ease with myself.
Has it also made you more comfortable in the social scene, in terms of the industry? Living in California, do you find it more fun or greater pleasure now to be with your fellow actors and performers socially? If indeed you didn't in England.
Well, the only time I meet actors is in work. I stay clear of actors and performers outside. My friends are outside the profession. A very close friend, he's associated with me, he's in publicity, for example. But actors no, and actresses no, I stay well away. Not because I have any dislike or disregard, because I have enormous respect for my colleagues, you know. But I find that the talking about acting, unless it's on a professional, you know, basis like an interview, I find it monotonous and boring, and I think it's... and I've done it all. I've talked about it endlessly, and I came out of the same door none the wiser. And so I've stopped talking about it now. And I thought I was smart enough to have all the ideas and all the answers, and I don't have any answers. Except that now I just don't, it's a pointless exercise. It really is an exercise in futility, sitting around talking about acting. And you know, actors can be very boring, very, very boring and dull. And I find it an enormous relief to get in the car at night and go home and do my job, get on with my job and go home at night and turn up and show up in time and get a good night's sleep. That was the impossible dream for me, you see, because I can do that now. I can actually get home. I don't have to spend time hanging around the theatre, trying to prove myself, gaining people's approval. When I finished Equus in New York, I mean, the people would stand up and applaud, and then I'd have to go over to the bar and get more approval. Because I was addicted to approval. I've been an addictive person. I'm addicted to approval. I'm addicted to people's applause. And it's a nightmare. I think that's a nightmare, you know. And I've had to learn little bit by little bit, and it's a slow process. I have to guard against my own ego. I have to, without being tough on myself. I don't keep myself in a tight rein now. A little bit at a time, I have to just let go and realize that their approval, your approval, isn't important. My own approval of myself is more important. And then if that fits in, then the world will come, you know, then the world's approval will follow suit, generally. But I can't please everyone. But I used to try to please everyone, you see. And if somebody didn't like what I did, I mean, that would drive me insane. I couldn't sleep at night trying to please that one person who was probably fast asleep, you know, while I was awake pacing the apartment, you know, wondering how I could get their approval. And all the enemies were illusions, you know, they were ghosts in my mind. And I remember in California recently, a couple of years ago, somebody said to me, they said, about one person, about a director, for example, who shall be nameless, that this man had tremendous control in my life. And this person, this friend of mine said to me, he said, my goodness, he said, they really have, he said, you've really given this man power. And I realized I'd given this man enormous power in my life. I treated him like God. And I believed that he was responsible for my very soul and for my very talent. And I didn't realize that it was a gift. And that nobody was responsible for it, only me. All I have to be is a good caretaker, you know. Just a good caretaker. And that lets me off the hook.
Is part of this, is a man who recently, the last couple of years of your life, has said that he has stopped drinking, stopped smoking, and while not a total vegetarian, have you given up meat? Are you now a vegetarian?
No. I eat chicken, I eat fish.
What about the smoking and drinking? I mean, was this a matter of discipline? Physical fitness?
No, it was just a realization one day that I'd come face to face with the reality that I was going to destroy everything if I didn't stop. There's a big problem in not only the acting profession, but it is a big problem in all industry, in all life, you know. I just realized that I'm not being Pollyanna, but I realized I was really self-destructing. I really was going to go crazy. I was driving myself insane. I was pouring the booze in. I was smoking my lungs to pieces, and I was dying slowly, bit by bit. And I think by the grace of God, I was given a message or a feeling inside myself one day that it was all over, that I needn't ever struggle or strive or fight anything anymore. And my drinking and my smoking was really a symptom of a deeper disorder. And really what it was a kind of psychological, spiritual disorder. And that all I had to do was shift back in line. And when I shifted back in line with whatever it is that runs this universe, because I'm convinced that I don't run it anymore as I always thought I did, I thought everything's okay. It always has been okay, and it always is okay. And I don't need to do those things anymore. So I just take it a little bit at a time, you know. And it's, in a way, it's like a recovery. You know, it's a recovery from... I wouldn't have missed it. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. Because it's been a second life for me. I'd never have missed it. It's been a wonderful life. And there was some fun in it, but the fun finally went out of it. The fun finally went out, and a part of me died with that. But I have an affection for that old self. And I carry it around with me, and he's still there. But I know that wherever I move, the precipice is behind me. But as long as I keep moving, keep going ahead, I don't have to look back again. And that I don't have to punish myself anymore. There's nothing to punish, you know. I haven't deserved the punishment. I now deserve a bit of peace of mind because I worked hard for it. And I have a relative peace of mind and a kind of comfort now in myself. And I hope whenever I get too smug or a little too pleased with myself, somebody will be there to remind me, you know, just to keep active, you know, and keep working.
We'll take a break on that. Be right back with Anthony Hopkins and more. Anthony Hopkins is with us. When we talk about acting and revelations, can you tell me something? Why, for you, particularly, the fascination and determination to do Hamlet? I mean, you said at one point that I hadn't done Hamlet since I was a student at RADA, and that you now felt you were ready and you wanted to do it in America. Why?
I've never played Hamlet.
You didn't do it at RADA?
Not even in the acting school. I played the Ghost once, and I played Claudius to Nicol Williamson's Hamlet, and I was too young for that and unhappy about the whole thing. And as a result of that, I thought it was a long, boring play, and actors were silly to want to do it. But one day, I was walking down Wilshire Boulevard, of all places, and feeling very happy with myself, and I suppose I had reason to be, I don't know. And suddenly I started saying, to be or not to be, that is the question. I don't know, it came from me, and a kind of something said to me, do it and direct it. I'd been running scared from this director some time ago, and I was feeling sore because I'd had enough of certain directors. I'd had enough of monsters. And I've made up my mind that I will never work with them again. I hope I never have to come in contact with the monsters again. Incidentally, I think all directors should take a course in acting. But anyway, and I thought, I'll do it and I'll direct it. But within 10 minutes, the whole concept had come to me. And I see Hamlet as a man. Somebody said to me the other day, why do you want to play another neurotic? And I don't believe he is. I mean, when I say I don't believe, it is only my interpretation of him. I see Hamlet as an extraordinary man, open and free, and after the revelation of the Ghost, that he is away and soaring, and he knows his destiny, and he moves, and he is being moved by tremendous forces. And it's the others around him who are the neurotics, the Claudius who couldn't wait and grabbed the crown, the Gertrude who's drinking herself to death, the Ophelia who is over the hill and has never made it, the two children of Polonius who are so screwed up because they've allowed their father to dominate their lives. And here's this man who knows his objective, knows his goal, and there are those two other creatures, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and he says, out of the way, fellas, because if you get in my way, I'll kill you. And he does. But he goes through like a breath of air. And I know I can do it. I know my Hamlet will be my Hamlet. And I feel powerful enough to direct it, and as long as I am objective about it, and I've taken a lot of preparation, and there's a very close friend of mine called Patrick Watkins, who incidentally helped me on Magic with the dialect and the accent. And he's associate director with me, and we're going to do it in South Coast Repertory. And I can't wait to do it. It's taken 3 years, but 2 years of filtering it down and just letting it. And it's being written for me. It's being directed for me, because I write it down and I'm amazed. I think, where did these concepts come from? So I just go along with it. And so I can't wait to do it.
Considering the professional involvement both men have had in your professional life, when Peter O'Toole did Hamlet at the National for Lord Olivier, did you see it?
No, I was in regional rep then. I was in Leicester. I remember its opening, though. I remember its opening. And I'd always, coming back to O'Toole, no, I didn't see it. But about O'Toole, I first saw O'Toole because he was instrumental in my acting career. I saw him in 1957 playing Jimmy Porter in Look Back in Anger at Bristol Old Vic, and the curtain went up and I'd never seen an electrifying person like that on stage before, because he filled the entire theatre, this long, gangly beanpole of a man. And it was the most audacious performance I've ever seen, and I'd always wanted, that clinched it for me. I thought, that's what I want to be. And of course, then he saw me in the National Theatre, in Olivier's production, so it is linked, and cast me in Lion in Winter. Olivier, coming back to Olivier, told me I should do Hamlet. I asked him when I was in Holland doing Bridge Too Far, I said, I want to do Hamlet, I want to direct it. He said, you shouldn't direct it there. He said, do it. He said, but get a friendly director, a friendly stage manager who can help you. And I'll still follow his advice. I asked him if he would direct it, but he very sweetly said no, he couldn't, and he's too tired. But it's a wonderful play. I think it's an infinite play. There's so much in it. And I've got my own way at last. I'm going to do it. And I've had to call my own bluff because I've procrastinated enough. Because before I go senile, I want to do it because I'm... and I think I'm at the right age to do it. I feel powerful enough to do it now. I feel really powerful.
When you speak about Olivier and O'Toole, and I'm reminded of a conversation someone had with Paul Scofield, and they were discussing prophetic, considering your movie, magic in the theatre. And Scofield's reply was, magic is no concern of ours. Our job in the theatre is to get on with it.
Yes.
Is there room for magic in the theatre, in your opinion? Or is your job to get on with it?
To get on with it, and the magic takes place. All life is magical. It is magic, you see, because we're the instruments, and all problems are technical. Once you can go through those problems without avoiding them or backing off from them, because it's like fear. You go through it. You go through the problem, confront it and go through it, then you have release. Stanislavski called it the plane of inspiration that takes off from the runway. The runway is the technique, the runway is the getting on with it, and the plane will take off. If on Tuesday night, however, it doesn't quite take off, it doesn't matter. You can't stop the plane and say, well, I'll go back because I don't feel it tonight. You get on with it technically, and then on Wednesday night, probably it's going to take off again, as long as you're relaxed. But it really is, it's kind of being on automatic pilot. And I think it comes after experience. I think it comes out, and I think I feel in the happy state of mind now that I have 15 years or 20 years of experience behind me. And I think it's used well, and there's a lot of positive out of all the anguish and the pain and discomfort. And there have been good times, there have been negative times. But Olivier said once, when he was directing Colin Blakely in June and the Peacock, and I was in June and the Peacock, and he said, you have to find the middle man. And Blakely said, what do you mean? He said, find the middle man, that ease of playing a character. And Blakely said, I only have until next week. And he said, you won't do it next week. It'll take you the rest of your life. And it's really relaxing and letting go. You know, the booster that puts one into outer orbit, the aggression, the arrogance and the ambition and all that, that's all very necessary. But there's a time when one has to let go. And I guess I'm in orbit. And all I have to do is rest assured that it's going to be okay. And do what is required of me, you know. Keep in practice. Keep working. I'm going back to the theatre. I want to go back to the theatre. And I'm being kind to myself. That's all I can say, really. Then the magic happens. Scofield is right. You get on with it. John Dexter told me in New York, he said, just get on with it. Don't analyze. Do it.
When John Dexter directed you in New York, in Equus, and you played almost 360-something performances?
Yeah, about that.
Is it technique that sustained you on those evenings when you know there is no magic? Are you pushing the right buttons?
Oh, yes. Yeah, yes. Sometimes it's Sisyphus going up the hill with a stone. It's sometimes very difficult, and it's easy to say, well, I must love the audience. Sometimes it's very difficult when people come in late with the shopping bags and all that. It is difficult, but then my job is to get on with it and do the best I can. And the amazing thing is usually it's when they come back and say, what a wonderful performance, and when you've been feeling really off. And technique, it comes back to technique.
As a man who received the acclaim you did on Broadway, did you want the film version?
No, I got over my resentment. I prepared myself for the resentment and I got over it fast. My wife held the resentment for some time. I knew that they would cast a star actor, and I think Jack Nicholson was up for it, Brandon was up for it. So I got over it. I didn't see the film, not out of sour grapes or anything, but because it was over. I'd done it, and I did it recently in California.
But you directed it in California. You
I
didn't
directed
just star in it.
Yes, I did. I played it and directed.
Yes, I know, both.
Yes. Yes. So I got over my resentment and I accepted that they were going to cast somebody, and I'm glad Richard Burton did it. But I didn't see it, and I'm glad I didn't do it now.
All right, we'll take another break on that. I'll be right back with Anthony Hopkins. Anthony Hopkins is with us. We were just talking around Equus as stage and film. Why, when you went back to California, did you want to go into the Huntington Hartford Theatre and act in and direct another production of Equus? Something you missed in New York?
No, I just wanted to stay out of trouble, really. I wanted to keep off the streets.
It wasn't as if you weren't working, Tony.
Well, no, I wasn't working, in fact.
Really?
I wasn't. I hadn't been working for about 6 to 8 months. I was having a rest, and I started getting anxious. And I phoned my agent up, and I said, I've got to do something. I said, anything. I said, I didn't care what it is. He said, well, let's talk to James Doolittle at the Huntington Hartford. And James said to me, he said, would you like to do Equus? I said, you've just done it with Brian Bedford. He said, would you like to do it again? I said, well, I'd love to. I said, but I want to direct it. I said, I don't think I can go through it with John Dexter again. Brilliant man that he is, but I said, I'd like to do it my way. And we were off and away, you know, and unfortunately we didn't have too much time to rehearse it, but so I got a good cast together, and I insisted that everyone had a good time, learned the lines fast, got on with it, and they did, and it was a wonderful experience. It was an extraordinary experience directing. My wife was associate producer. She was backstage looking after all the problems, and which I didn't want to know about, and she would tell me those at night on the way home, and I'd say, okay, well, we'll get those ironed out. And it was a strange feeling, because I'd written it in a diary once. I said to myself, I used to, you know, I believe in the power of positive thinking and visualizing oneself. I visualized myself being back here once, in fact. I wrote it in a diary, I will do Equus in California. And then when Brian Bedford did it, I thought, well, that's it. And then, boom. So I know I'm going to do my Hamlet, for example. And I wanted to get it out of my system. I wanted to find out why I'd wanted to do it so much. And I did it, and I discovered a whole new interpretation for it. And the interpretation was parallel to my own life, parallel to the change in my own life in the last 3 years. And it was a revelation to me that I could at that moment become Dysart, because the interpretation was mine, and it was unique to me. And it was really for me, and in California doing Equus, Dysart was redeemed. It was a play of redemption. I believe that at the end of the interpretation in California, when I did it, was that this Dysart would cut all his losses, give up psychiatry, give up his wife, give up his family, and go. And write or paint or go off to Greece on his own and meditate and contemplate, because what he has been faced with is power greater than himself, and that there is no point in analysing, and that the boy, was an instrument in his life. And he was delivered, because what he'd been facing all his life, he was trying to dissect. He was an insect, and he was dissecting, and finally he drove himself mad, and a part of him died, and finally he was faced with the ultimate truth, the ultimate reality. And it was a catharsis for him. And he says, at the end, he says, what dark is this? And he comes up with the answer, I don't know. I know nothing. Because, you know, unto ourselves we are nothing. And that is what Dysart found for himself. And beyond the play, what was nice, though, was to see the audience being stunned and in pain, and I was back in the dressing room drinking my coffee and happy. And people would say, how are you feeling so fresh? I said, well, I just had a good time. They said, well, we were wiped out. So that was a great achievement for me.
Did you know Robert Shaw?
briefly. I knew him. I met him twice. I worked in the same film with him, Young Winston, and I met him briefly in, I think it was in Pasadena when we were doing the Emmy Awards. I was very sad to hear about his death.